about love. Every love is bound to maintain it. You got for nothing less you are. Don't throw a stone, you don't know. It's not what you say, it's what you do. Don't throw your stone.
Hello, welcome back to week 11 of Out on That Line. Unfortunately, this week it is going to be just me talking to you about Elvis Costello's classic album, Trust. Alex couldn't make it this week. He's just been, a little bit under the weather, just... What is that? What? Is that Alex Koch's music?
It's me, Jeff. I'm here. I beat the odds.
Oh, my God.
And I made it. And I've got something to say. You and I have talked about this privately, and I haven't told you what this is. But I did tell you that it's a bit of a mea culpa, an apology that I need to issue. The Pettysburg Address, as we've been calling it, if you will. I have been beating up on a couple people in particular on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I have a tendency to shit all over Taylor Swift, the 1975 are not safe. But there's someone that I've been kind of just kind of taking cracks at. And I have to come through with an apology.
Okay.
Can you guess who it is?
I can't.
It's Billie Eilish.
Oh, my goodness.
I have to issue a formal Out on That Line apology to Miss Eilish.
And what brought that on?
Night, well, I'll tell you, Jeff. The other night, I was sitting and working on a script. And I was like, I kind of need some music to listen to, but it can't be distracting me from my thoughts here. So it's got to be something that I'm okay with having on in the background to keep me company and not something I'm going to get sucked into. Well, so much for that, because I ended up listening to When We All Fall Down, What the Fuck Happens to Us, whatever the fucking... I should put some...
When We Sleep, Where Do We Fart, or something like that.
Yeah. When you sleep, where do you lay your arm when you're sleeping with another person? I should put some respect on the album's name because I came around on it, but whatever. It's slow. Progress is incremental.
Yeah. And I haven't listened to that full album. I've liked the songs on it. Like, I think Bad Guy is an absolute bop. Like, I think that's an absolute jam.
Well, and therein lies the whole linchpin of the album is the concept of the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Because I'm trying to write a script, and that's all about structure. And I'm thinking like, okay, how do I want to structure this? What's going on? And through that, I started to really zero, like the music became catchy, and I zero in on what's being said, what's going on, and I found the structure in that album. And thematically, it really kind of is the rise and fall of the bad guy.
Okay.
And something about that just kind of stuck for me because she repeats it at the very end of the album. It sounds like the bad guy in a Scarface way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Say goodnight to the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I get out of it anyway, is structurally it's the rise and fall of a delinquent. And I don't think she thinks she's so cool that she's an outlaw. I think it's like a totally distance examination of what that looks like because she has no life experience like that. She's fucking 17.
Yeah.
She's only ever lived on one side of the law, the right one. So what's remarkable about it is it stops sounding like a 17-year-old who's just kind of like playing with these themes. She put a lot of work into it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, yeah. I realized the more I listen to it, I'm like, I don't love the low-key kind of like weird murmury effects. I don't love all of the production on it, but she's taking a fucking chance. She's trying to serve a certain audience, the TikTok crowd, and that's her age group. I mean, she's 17. She's not my age. So I think she's someone with a lot of talent, and I don't love this album. It's not like, I suddenly think it's the greatest fucking thing ever, but it, for me, was my Trout Mask replica, which I think I've talked about before. You have to listen to it multiple times to get anything out of it. And eventually what made me crack it was I pick either the singer, Beefheart, or I pick an instrument. And if I follow that, I can make it through the song and everything else falls into place. So it was just like cracking the Billie Eilish album and finding a way into it where it kind of, I get it now. I can't say I love it. I respect its right to exist. And I get it. I understand it. So I want to say good job, Billy. And I look forward to what's coming next.
Great job, Billy. Great work. That you were like Tom Hanks cracking the Eilish code, you know?
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah.
With my nice hairpiece on.
That's great. I got to listen to that whole album. I haven't listened to it in full. Like I said, I like a few of the songs. I think the one she performed at the Grammys when she won basically everything, I think was a really good one. I think it was one of the slower ones. I don't know the name, but
well, and I stick by my assertion that the album doesn't belong on the 500 greatest albums of all time. Not at this point.
Yeah.
Does it deserve to win a bunch of Grammys? I don't fucking think so, but I'm also the guy that's like, why would you give awards for art? So,
yeah.
I'm pro Eilish. I flipped, okay?
Yeah. Hell
if
yeah.
the country's going to flip blue, I'm going to flip green for Eilish.
Well, I think with the awards thing that it's easy to, I think there should be some sort of reward for creating things like that. It shouldn't be such a ranked competition though.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that if you like weren't nominated, your album must not have been good enough. It's like,
right.
Cause you think about an entire calendar year and kind of the quality of artists, especially now. I mean, since the Grammys have existed, like, and the ease with which that music can get disseminated now with social media and like Spotify, all these like really quick, you can just grab and go kind of services. It's tough to say that, how could you narrow it down to just 5 or 10? Did they expand it to 10 or was that just the Oscars?
I don't keep up with the Grammys at all or the Oscars.
Yeah. I mean, whatever amount it is, even if it's 10, like that's still, you're going to pick what you say are the 10 best albums, but it's by a small group that's picking them. Thankfully with the Grammys, I think it's more the recording artists themselves that pick it. And it's not like an academy like it is with the Oscars.
Right.
But it's albums should be rewarded, I guess is what I'm saying. It shouldn't be necessarily that one wins and it means the others weren't as good. It just, I think it should be tweaked. I think there should be a night of recognition for, what artists have put out that year. But I think the way they do it, I agree with you, is a little strange.
Well, because it's just kind of centered now on marketability. Like, if you win the Grammy for Best New Album or you win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, your asking price goes up. And there's a lot that the people behind the machine can do with that, as opposed to like, you want to just be like, hey, again, if it was an artist consensus where it's like, hey, we polled the industry and this is Luke Combs' year. He had a banner year and we want to recognize how much ass he kicked this year and how much he looks like Matt Reno.
I was sending a few texts to Matt Reno last night when I was imbibing on those whiskey drinks I was talking to you about.
You were in your cups, yes.
Yes, I was deep in my cups last night. little tough. But I got myself a nice sausage McMuffin though this morning. Took the dog to the vet for her annuals, and then got myself some delicious McDonald's breakfast.
See, that's what I thought you meant when you said take the dog to the vet. I thought that's what you meant, getting yourself a McMuffin. Yeah, I got real drunk last night, woke up this morning, had to take the dog to the vet, if you know what I'm saying. That
should be a euphemism for something, right? It's like see a man about a horse. Yeah. Take the dog to the vet. Now. That's a good one. Yeah, we're going to start using that. All credit goes to Out on That Line. When you start using that in real life, folks, all credit goes to us. Make sure you know that.
Yep.
Okay, so what do you say we discuss Elvis Costello in the Attractions album Trust? Now, I will say the reason that we're doing this album, this one came out, 81? Is 81. That correct? And the reason we're doing this one is because Alex is a self-proclaimed big Costello fan. I am a self-proclaimed non-fan of Elvis Costello. And for the reasons why is, if anybody's ever watched I think it's called The Lost Tapes. It's a documentary on Showtime. It's about, I think it was T-Bone Burnett. The record label had found a bunch of old Bob Dylan lyrics that he never did anything with. And they asked T-Bone Burnett to kind of get a group together. And the group that he got together was the lead singer of Dawes. It'd be great if I remembered his name. Do you remember? I think it's Taylor something, right?
Good question.
So that guy.
No clue.
Jim James, Yim Yames from My Morning Jacket, Marcus Mumford from Mumford & Sons, Rhiannon Giddens from the Carolina Chocolate Drops. I think she's doing her own solo stuff now. She's very good. Check her out. As well as our man Elvis Costello. And I had listened to some Elvis Costello songs previously. Like Everybody's Heard Allison, like everybody's heard that song. Like he's got a few that are big hits. And I've seen Austin Powers, so I'm very well aware of of the Costello. But in that documentary, he was probably the least useful part of it. Probably the least, the person that contributed the least and seemed to kind of argue with everybody about the right way to do things. And it's like, he was the kind of elder statesman of the songwriters in there, to be fair. But, we're not talking about people that are bad at what they're doing. I mean, Jim James is a great songwriter. I know you're, pretty good fan of Dawes, and I've certainly listened to a handful of their songs quite a few times, but I just kind of got a little sour taste in my mouth from that appearance in the documentary with him. So, but I did say with this podcast that we were going to come into this willing to change our minds. And Alex, great example already with the Billie Eilish thing. And I think I've warmed slightly to Elvis Costello with this one. I was able to find a couple songs that I enjoyed, or I guess that I just didn't want to immediately turn off.
That's faint and damning praise right there.
Yeah. Let me know. You tell me what it is in Elvis Costello that really trips your trigger.
Okay. I think part of it is probably abstract. It's just like, why do you like a certain scent? I'm sure there's probably some reason in your unconscious mind why the smell of fresh cut grass and pipe tobacco makes you feel a certain way. And I'm not smart enough to know what it is. So there's a certain amount of abstraction where it's like the music just sounds good to me. Like it gets stuck in your head and you kind of vibe with it. But then beyond that, I think it's really the way that I'm drawn to people like Tom Waits, Frank Zappa, David Bowie, even though he had arguably the most mainstream success out of anyone I just named. And also he's well loved, and not all of his stuff, a lot of it was more conceptual. But people like Tom Waits, people like Elvis Costello are the defender of the outcast. And even though I'm kind of over my like teenage martyrdom days where I'm like, no one understands me, I'm lost, you could find me down in the Reaper Bond hanging out with a one-eyed whore. Like, no, you're 16, clean your fucking room, shut up. But I've always had an affinity. It's why I until he stopped making anything worthwhile, really liked Tim Burton. Because anyone that has an affinity for the asymmetrical, the broken, the lost, the damaged, I'm really interested in that. Because, again, I'm going to beat up on her because I can't give too much ground. Taylor Swift, when Heartache goes as far as my Froyo order was a little lumpy, I can't get interested in that. But a lot of the songs on Trust, on this album in particular, are reflective of like an aging Lothario who blames women for his lack of luck with women. But this is the album where he finally started to realize, like, maybe I'm the problem. If you walk outside and everyone's an asshole, maybe they're not. Maybe you're the asshole. This was kind of the first reckoning with this. And I just think in terms of the overall scope of why I love Elvis Costello, that's really what it is just his interest in the broken and the belittled and the damned and the stories that he tells about them, and can they get out of suffering? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes his shit is more abstract than, a song like Veronica, which tells a story, which is off the album Spike. So yeah, I think as a storyteller with a niche interest, that's really what kind of does it for me. That and he isn't afraid to do a lot of different things. Trust is an album where he tried out a bunch of different things. He wasn't really concerned with genre. Like, you look at his first couple albums, My Aim Is True, which is his debut. That's the Angry Young Man album. You look at this year's Model. That's kind of an incel, men go their own way type thing where it's like, women suck and I have no luck with them. Armed Forces was his political album. Get Happy was the 60s R&B album. So he's always kind of been able to change every time, but put himself in a new box. And Trust, he just kind of like threw darts at the board and went in whatever direction interested him. So I appreciate whenever anyone tries to do something like that too. It's a long way of giving my answer, I guess.
I think that explains it, because I felt like I was listening to a splatter painting on a lot of it, and so I think one of my overall things that I found it difficult to kind of get into the whole album is just I felt like I had a kind of lack of context for a lot of the things that he was singing about. So it was tough to kind of extract what it is because he uses some very like kind of off the wall metaphors and ways to describe things, so it was, I feel like I kind of got the general idea, but without knowing all of the slang and everything that he was using and knowing kind of where he was trying to go with a lot of those metaphors, I felt like I was missing the message on a lot of the songs. And, especially on the first one, Clubland, because musically throughout the album, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was off the wall. Like it was just, he was clearly just like, you know what? I feel like having a piano right there. I feel like having a second guitar right there, so, and it all worked. Like rhythmically, it was good. It was interesting. There was no point where I was like, wow, I really am confused about what he's doing here. It's just that, I felt like with lyrically, I just didn't have the context to understand necessarily the stories he was trying to tell me. And maybe on other albums, like you mentioned, there's a 60s R&B one. Maybe that style of music is going to be more conducive to me understanding that. I feel like with this one, this is probably like just Elvis Costello let his brain loose and just went wild on this one. So, with Clubland, I enjoyed it, and it kind of struck me as kind of like not like a Western town, but I'm kind of thinking of a smaller town, but that has that one hot spot, but it's still a small town, and it's like not the greatest place to be. Like it's kind of run down, it was kind of the vibe I was getting by it. But you could tell me if that's something that if I have that wrong or right.
No. And I think I guess maybe this whole conversation will benefit from like a more abstract conversation than just like, well, lyrically, what's going on here? Because I agree with you. There is a density to his lyrics, which I think cuts both ways. It makes it very interesting, but like the last song on the album, fuck, I should know this without looking, but I got to do it.
Big Sister's Clothes.
Yeah, Big Sister's Clothes.
Yeah.
Is about Margaret Thatcher and the incursion in the Falkland, like the whole Falklands War thing. I would not know that, and I don't think anyone reading the lyrics would necessarily get that. I mean, it's like we're talking about with Run the Jewels when they talk about Napoleon and Toussaint. It's like, if you don't know who Toussaint is, it's easy to just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And if you do, it adds way more context to the song and what he's trying to get across. So if you're an American listener with no idea what was going on in the conservative government of England in the 80s, then you're not going to look at it on that level. You can only look at the text before you.
Yeah.
And it completely changes your interpretation of the song, which I guess is good and kind of opens up a different discussion, which is, sometimes you get something that's super direct. It's something like Bruce Springsteen, I'm Going Down. Pretty direct to know what that song is about.
Yeah.
But anytime you're kind of being metaphorical, I could see someone who didn't really necessarily get what was going on in Rainmaker. You and I might think it's obvious, but maybe someone listening from Mumbai is not going to understand, this is about Trump and this is about demagogues.
Yeah.
They might just be like, oh, it's about like the American tradition of the like Native Americans and Rainmaker and the rain dance. Like, who fucking knows what they get out of it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a pitfall with Elvis Costello and lyrical interpretation. It's very dense, which can flavor it really nicely, but can also make it really frustrating.
Yeah. And there were, I will, when we get through and I'm able to talk about it, he does at certain points he does become a much more concise storyteller on a couple songs on the album, which is great because those songs I really liked. And I was like, okay, well, I can see why, you and Tanner, really love this guy, and I don't think it's something that I'm going to probably go back and, and listen to a bunch, but, certainly I've kind of put my knives away a bit on Elvis Costello here. I do want to point out, I thought the bridge on this song was really, really clever. Where he said, the long arm of the law slides up the outskirts of town. So, it's like a little double entendre there. And meanwhile, in Clubland, they are ready to pull them down. And so that just the outskirts of town, like everybody knows what that is, just the outer city limits, but he's talking about it as, reference to a woman's garment. And it's just a really clever spot. And he's got those little shots throughout the album, where it's like all of a sudden, through the haze, a shining light of something I could actually understand, which was nice. Yeah. And it's, again, so musically it's good, but I think a lot of the, like, lyrically, it's just like, I don't know how much work I want to do to unpack it all. To me, it just doesn't quite fit with me as far lyrically, but the music is good. Like the fact that he could make everything that, should sound so disjointed, but it sounds like it's just about to go off the rails the whole time, but it just never does. It's just a very well, as far as, the production and everything was very good.
Well, he and the crew were also drunken on drugs making this album. Like,
okay.
Station to Station was the one Bowie doesn't remember making. Elvis Costello talks about, like, I finished this album with Jack and gin and powders, and only one of them was, antifungal powder or whatever, wink, wink. So, I mean, they were all fucked up, and a lot of the, like, drum playing in this, you can tell is right on the edge of, like, we might have to get some coffee in this dude.
Yeah.
So you're right. It all works. It all sounds like at any moment, if somebody gets tripped up, they're fucked. Everyone's falling down the escalator. But I think that's kind of its charm too. Is it's got like a chaotic charm to it. And then when it needs to be pulled back and beautiful on something like Shot with His Own Gun, which is very, very simple. It's basically just Costello and Steve Naive on piano. So this actually brings up, I think, again, with this, because I'm a credentialed Costello advocate. And you didn't really like him before, probably don't still like him this much. So it's, I think, more of an interesting conversation from those two perspectives than maybe even like drilling down in every lyric on every song.
Yeah.
So let me ask you an overall question about Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
In what way, because we're talking about the work you have to do to unpack the lyrics, in what way does his voice create some distance between you and the enjoyment of his music?
So I don't hate his voice, and I think the way he sings some of the lyrics gets a little bit annoying because I'm just like, finish the line, and because he really does stretch it out a lot, and you had mentioned it, and goddamn, I'm going to forget her name, Leanne Lavis, when we were doing that album, and we were kind of discussing that kind of vocal style that she was doing. I didn't realize that he does it all the time, like every other
chronically.
line. Yeah, chronically. And it works sometimes, but then other times I feel like because it's just his cadence is just not what I expect it to be to match with the music. So I found myself kind of just getting tripped up and kind of just lost a little bit sometimes while I figured out where he was coming back in or whether that was still the same line. But as far as his voice, that doesn't, it's not obviously the greatest voice of all time, but it wasn't, his vocal abilities were not, I didn't find them at all detestable or anything like that.
Because that's another, I think, argument that could be made is some of the way when he is stretching words or condensing them very quickly. But he's got that high-pitched nasal and he's British and he's not like overwhelmingly British.
Yeah.
But it's just enough that with the intonation in his voice and an accent and saying something like prestidigitation, and he's trying to not just say it exactly on the beat, prestidigitation. Yeah. It's like prestidigitation, like how he tends to phrase things. I mean, there are some songs that, going back through and looking at the lyrics for this discussion, I caught stuff that I'd been like singing to myself completely wrong.
Yeah.
I'd never like really bothered to look at the lyrics. I'm like, well, that is not what I thought it was. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just like I said. I mean, I've listened to a ton of Bob Dylan. Like, his voice is not the greatest. I've listened to a bunch of like some Tom Waits. Like, I've listened to a bunch of other, music where you're not going to people. The singer's not a classically good singer. You're not going to think like Bob Dylan in a room with Aretha Franklin. Like, Aretha Franklin's a better singer in that competition 11 times out of 10.
Oh fuck yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it just, as long as it matches the music, as long as they're not trying to do so much, because I don't think at any point he ever thought of himself as a great singer either. I think he was just like, I have this idea in my head. I'm the one that is going to have to deliver it. So he sang well enough for that. So I've got nothing bad to say about his voice, just maybe the way he structures his cadence, kind of the meter he uses sometimes is like, where did you come up with that? Like, why, and I was like, why did you think that? You should have done, I was like, you should have done another take where you sang it a little different and compared them and realized that if you didn't, you don't have to stretch every single end of the second, like every single B line, in every single verse. And it just seemed like that's kind of what he was doing. Cause he definitely has like, I don't want to say like a vocal tick but it's like, that's his style, and it pulls me out every time it happens. Like, it kind of just jolts me and I'm like, oh, that's not what I expected to happen. So now I have to like zero back in on what I'm trying to listen to.
Well, and it's like anything but formulaic. So it's like very rarely like an A, B, or A, B, B or anything like that. He's all over the place structurally and it keeps it very exciting. But the downside of that is sometimes there's a song that I love by him, Party Girl off of Armed Forces. And it starts a certain way and you fall in love with the way it sounds and then he changes it. It's like a very abrupt departure into the chorus. And then it goes into this like post-chorus almost. It's hard to categorize like structurally from music theory standpoint what is actually, it's not a bridge. It's just like an extra part of the song that doesn't sound like the first verse, doesn't follow the same rhyme scheme. It's like no 2 seconds in this song are like the other. Yeah. So it's great, but then sometimes you're like, there's kind of a hook to this, and if you wanted to, you could ride that a couple more times and I'd be into it. So I think that's also probably why with the Lost Tapes, he didn't fit in with that group. A, the elder statesman, but B, I think he really only can write for himself and his people in a very specific style. Your mileage may vary. Like Momofuku is an album that he did that if I'm not mistaken, was like orchestral selections. Doesn't really work for me. He did do an entire album of country songs that is much maligned, but I actually happen to really enjoy.
See, I feel like he would be good at that.
I mean, you hear it on this one, Rings on a Different Finger.
Yeah.
That's a country song.
Yeah, and I felt like the more simple he got, the more I liked it on this album. So like the song you were talking about, Shot with His Own Gun, that was that was one that I liked. And I think, let's see, You'll Never Be a Man, I thought was another good one. That one's kind of a bop, but it's just, I felt like the way that, he put things together, it was easy enough to understand. It's like, it was easy enough to like see what he was talking about so that I could maybe connect with it a little bit, and it's just, and the way he sang it was very, a little more formulaic than some of the other songs on there. So, me being such a big fan of like pop rock from like the 60s, 70s and 80s and stuff like that really appeals to me when songs are like that. So he, has always marched to the beat of his own drum, so he's kind of dipped into that territory a little bit here and there. But that's not his MO, from what I understand and from what I heard on this album, but that was a song that I thought was pretty good. I definitely put a star next to that one. Lover's Walk, I didn't think was great.
No, I mean, I get Lover's Walk. I get it, but yeah, we can skip over that. Honestly, what I'd like to do is just go through the ones that kind of tripped your trigger.
Yeah.
And if I want to ask you a question about anything else, we can loop back. So you want to just stick with You'll Never Be a Man, because I do have questions for you on this one.
Yeah.
So what was your interpretation of the story here, or the themes? Like, what do you think the song's about? No wrong answers, just curious.
So I kind of got the idea that, he was obviously, you mentioning him, drinking a lot and probably doing some drugs while making this album made sense, because it kind of struck me as like one of them, like he was trying to get with a woman and one of them had too much of something, like it is kind of what it struck me as. And it's, and I think what kind of gave me that, when you're half a woman and you're half awake with a face full of tears and a chemical shake, and that kind of told me, it's like, well, I don't know if she's ODing, but it certainly sounds like there's some substances going on here. And he's kind of towing the line of like, whether it's okay or not to do something with her, and I don't know if that's correct, but that's kind of what I got from this one.
The thing is, when he does talk about what a song is about, I mean, you'd be surprised how like little information you can find about lyrical interpretation with him. And I like that, because if you are going to make something that's so lyrically dense, it obviously will be about something specific to you, but I think it's kind of nice when you leave it open to interpretation. I mean, if you really need people to walk away and go, oh, that song was about a breakup, then it's on you to make that crystal clear. But if it's more you trying to convey an emotion or a feeling or a concept, then you can be more abstract with it. So I agree with you in the sense that I think that it's definitely two people out and they're maybe vibing a little bit. And to me, it's everything you said, but the guy fucks up and is coming on too strong and isn't really making a great impression and gets turned down.
Okay.
And now he's doing the incel thing where he's like, fucking bitch, like whatever, you just hate men. You just hate all men. That's why you don't want to be with me. Because I look at something like, you'll never be a man no matter how many foreign bodies you can take. You're half a woman, half awake, face full of tears and chemical shake. Basically, like, you're just a dried up old bitch and you'll never be, you're not even a woman and you can't really even be a man. We know that all women have penis envy. It's just like it's like a weirdly brutish song that when you listen to it, there's such clever wordplay in certain parts. So it sounds very genteel, but it's almost like a real male chauvinist pig anthem.
Yeah.
Like, I love this line. You strike a profile on the low side of my imagination. My eyes climb down to find the point of possible saturation. I mean, we can all figure out what he means there. Do you have a functioning vagina?
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's like this guy clearly wants to get laid and is frustrated by the fact that this woman is not having it, so it must be a defect with her.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to bang you anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you don't deserve these horn-rimmed glasses, baby.
So I wonder, when he says no matter how many foreign bodies you can take, I think the obvious answer there is drugs, like foreign bodies, like pills, coke, whatever you want to say, like how much of that you can take and still function. But also, I think it could mean like how many women he could get with too. Like, when everybody, when you're younger and everybody's talking about their number, and I think that to him, like obviously with how he's acting with getting shut down here, to him, like how many people he slept with is a badge of honor, so it's, but she's saying, no matter how many you've slept with, how many drugs you do, that doesn't make you any more of a man, so I think that's kind of a cool thing he did there too. And again, it's just, I felt like I really got enjoyment out of the songs that I felt like I could really understand. And this was one of them that I was like, at least maybe I didn't get it exactly right, but at least I got something out of it that I could put it in context as I was listening to it.
Yeah. The bass line on this one too, it's like nice and subtle, but those moments where everything else kind of blips away for a minute so you can hear it, just that boom, it's this like, great stuff. A lot of like
the bass
Paul
lines on this album
McCartney-inspired
were really good all the way through. I think it was, hold on, I wrote down which one. I guess I can't remember which one. There was I guess maybe because there was a few of them, but there was a lot of really good bass lines in this. Like his band is good. And I think and I think he's a pretty good guitar player too. I don't think he's any slouch when it comes to the strings, but I think his band was really the strength of this whole album. And like if they were playing this kind of stuff and they were that hammered, I mean, that's wild to me. I would never have been able to do that. No shot.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't presume to speak for the attractions, but he did. He was like, "Oh yeah, we were all on drugs." I'd love to hear all of them be like, "No, we weren't.
Yeah.
We were fine."
Yeah.
He was fucked up.
Bass player's like, "I was sober as a judge."
Yeah, you fucking kidding me? I never had a drop of alcohol in my life. You know what he's talking about. What's another one? Or actually, wait, I wanted to ask you a question about this, and it's a potentially touchy topic. But I sent this song, I put it on a playlist for a girl that I was briefly seeing in New York. And I had just come back. I got to see Elvis Costello on my birthday last year. And I just gotten back, and I was having this date with her, and I had mentioned, like, "Oh, I saw Elvis Costello. He's one of my favorites." And she's like, "Oh, I'm not familiar. Make me a playlist." So I did, and this song was on it. And the next time we had dinner, she was like, "I can't believe you like that You'll Never Be a Man song." I was like, "Why? What's wrong with it? I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. But it seems like you have a very specific reason why I shouldn't like it. What is it?" And she was like, "It is the most transphobic thing I have ever heard in my life."
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
And then I really looked at the lyrics. I'm like, I guess I understand where you would derive that interpretation purely from the text, I guess. If you wanted to. It's like a Nostradamus prediction. You can make it fit.
Yeah.
You'll never be a man no matter how many hormones, no matter how many foreign bodies you can take. You're half a woman.
That's a stretch.
Like you're.
See, it was the half a woman line that I would have thought was the one she pulled. I would have, like, foreign bodies, like that would have been the last thing I would have ever thought that was referencing.
First thing she went to, foreign bodies, hormone therapy. I'm like, it was 1981. And I think if he was going to write a song about that, it wasn't going to be the perspective of when a song opens with, "Though the fist is mightier than the lip, it adds to aggravation."
Yeah.
It's not going to be about punching a trans woman in the mouth. He's not the most progressive guy on the planet, but he's no Republican.
Well, it's really too bad that one didn't work out, huh?
Yeah, you know. Jeff. Someday I'll meet Mrs. Right.
You just need to find a Mrs. Right now. For now, you know, Mrs. Right will come along. Yeah, Mrs. Right will come along sometime. So the next one that I really thought was pretty good was Luxembourg. And it was just, I'm not absolutely positive about what it is, but it sounds like it's about like kind of corrupt politicians, maybe. Or somebody that's a liar in some manner or a hypocrite. But I really think is it political? I mean, it feels like it's political.
I mean, I would gather as much from reading the lyrics that it's political, but I actually came up with my own, I get a completely different read off of it than maybe what was intended. And there's obviously like an element of the corruption and the political message in it. But I looked at specifically the first verse, "Dressed up like a dog's dinner," which I get means something different. "Butter wouldn't melt on your paws." So "dressed up like a dog's dinner" is apparently a British expression, which means like you're way too dressed up. Like hat on a hat is something that I say.
Okay.
It's just too much ornamentation. So "dressed up like a dog's dinner, butter wouldn't melt on your paws, you're cold. If this is a dog's life, then you're the cat's clothes, the cat's pajamas. They hire out your sons and hire out your daughters. The man from abroad says he's already bought her. And now you look like a lover, but you're only a tourist." So to me, I'm like, okay, a lover, someone who's consistent, or a tourist, which could be a hooker, someone who's only temporarily here to perform this duty. You're either talking or you're yawning. A hooker's only going to feign interest in what you're doing. You didn't listen to a thing you heard. Don't start with your the lyric is "Don't start your morning moaning or you might wake up in Luxembourg." I kind of took that as like, watch your mouth or we can make you disappear. So to me, it's a song about corrupt politicians hanging out with hookers, and there's danger on both sides. If the hooker runs her mouth, they can disappear you. If the hooker gets the wrong idea, this could be very bad for the politician and his family.
Okay. Yeah, that it was I like the music in this one too. Like I felt like it was a little bit more subdued. I mean, still a good like little rock song, but definitely less off the wall than other songs. It had kind of it felt like just a much more concise structure to it, and I thought it was really good. I mean, still plenty dense lyrically, but it's very good. Like, I like this one.
Yeah, it's got like a kind of an Elvis Presley-esque quality to it musically. It's got that sense of urgency, the kind of hip shaking.
Yeah, I wonder if he ever like straight up did Elvis songs, because Elvis Costello would make sense, right?
It's right there.
Yeah.
I probably should know, but I don't. This is why we need Tanner on this episode. He'd be like, actually,
he probably
1994 at a benefit concert in Greenland.
He probably would know too. Yeah, that one was good. The next song too, I think, is this like kind of the biggest one from the album Watch Your Step?
One of, yeah.
I don't know was Clubland a big hit from this one too?
Nothing off this was a big hit. This was one of the only ones that he had done to this point that didn't spawn any singles that charted.
Okay. Well, I think this one should have. Watch Your Step. I did like this one a lot. This is probably my favorite song on the album.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. I love the melodica on it. It's fucking great.
And it just seemed like, the way it was, like the way he said, "You better watch your step," was like very cynical, and very kind of foreboding. And it kind of gave me like a little bit of the chills, to a point. 'Cause it's like, it's almost like he's not really threatening them, but he's saying like, the world is going to get you. So watch your step, and it seemed like every verse, it was kind of just a different variation of like, if you don't watch your back, everything's going to be ruined for you. And I think maybe he was saying it from like his own perspective about like having to watch his step. Because I think he pretty historically did not watch his step, with the with the things he said and did, outside of music and stuff. I think he was a bit of a controversial guy from what I understand.
To fill in what you're talking about there, if I assume this is what you're talking about, but he was hanging out with Stephen Stills from it's Stephen Stills, right? Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Yeah. I think it was Stephen Stills and a female artist whose name escapes me. But they were all in a bar drinking. He didn't like what the woman was saying. They got into an argument about music, and he called Ray Charles the N-word twice. Mm-hmm. And this is not me excusing it. This is me giving context for what he said.
Yeah.
Which is, he was trying to be like, oh, he's a jive ass, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. He meant it complimentary while using the worst fucking word you can use to do so.
Yeah.
So that makes him a fucking prick. So, because let me put this right out there. If he had been like, he is an N-word who deserves to die, I would not be having this conversation with you about Elvis Costello right now. I would not own a lick of his vinyl. It is in no way to excuse what he said. I'm merely offering his explanation of events. That's all it is. But that's classic Elvis Costello. Open your fucking mouth and put your foot in there.
Yeah.
He's got big opinions. He's not necessarily going to tell you how to live, but you're going to hear what he has to say. And you're probably not going to like it because it's not going to be delivered with a lot of sensitivity.
Yeah. And that's why this song, like, just kind of knowing that about him, like, that's why this song, Watch Your Step, it was like almost like very delicately done. There's no, like, the music was pretty subdued on this one. It wasn't a very high-paced song. It didn't have a ton of energy to it, but it was very engrossing nonetheless. It was very much like I was kind of waiting each time for that last line, "You better watch your step," because it always seemed to land and always seemed to hit, I think, exactly as he wanted it to. And if it wasn't exactly as he wanted to, it was still plenty effective for me. So I think this one, as far as all the ones I liked on the album, I think this was the one I liked the best, honestly.
Well, and think about it too. If you're trying to warn someone, you can either scream in their fucking face, "Don't fucking go down that alley," or you can completely undersell it. And either way, they're going to fuck up. They're either going to go, "Don't tell me what to do," or they're going to say, "Well, it didn't seem like an imperative."
Yeah.
And then they're going to be in trouble. But this kind of like sinister way that's like, "You'd better watch your step." That's fucking creepy. That stays with you.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Yeah, it was a good one. The next one's New Lace Sleeves was okay. I did not star that one. From a Whisper to a Scream, this one I have no earthly clue what the hell he was talking about or trying to sing about on this one. Like no clue.
Yeah.
And he had that was the one with who's the guest singer on
Glenn
that one?
Tilbrook.
Was he in the attractions as well, or was he just a?
No, he was. He's from Squeeze.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. I was gonna say I think that I was like it sounds familiar because he's got a very, the guy that sings with him, that Glenn Tilbrook, he's got a very nice rock and roll voice.
Yeah.
Very like you fit in great with like the Kinks or one of those British bands that are just very digestible rock and roll music.
Have you listened to Squeeze beyond Tempted?
I don't think so. No.
There's some. I'll make you a little playlist. There's some
Okay.
really good Babylon and On, Argy Bargy. Those are like really interesting Squeeze albums. Squeeze had an interesting little new wave thing going on.
Okay. I would be happy to check them out. That'd be good. Yeah, but on this one I just have no clue what they were trying to go for on this one. So I just didn't hit for me. Different Finger.
Did you like?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you about Whisper to a Scream because I fucking love it musically.
Musically is great. And if you're just listening to the song, like the lyrics sound fine too. But when you're reading the lyrics and trying to understand what the hell he's talking about, I'm like, there was no Rosetta Stone in this one for me to like even begin to get the context of what he was talking about.
I think it's about going out and getting drunk with the boys. Like from what I've been able to piece together, this idea of like, we're walking down the street, you see a hot girl who's like, come party with me. And it's like, no, I've got plans. I'm getting pissed drunk with the fellas. Because what clued me in on it being a drinking song was after like several listens, I couldn't crack when the 1 over the 8 seems less like 1 and more like 4 or whatever the like actual lyric is.
Yeah.
I'm like, what 1 over the 8? Like what? Are they talking about time signatures? That's no fucking time signature I've ever heard of. So I had to look it up. 1 over the 8 is apparently a British expression. When you have 1 over the 8, it means it takes you about 8 beers to get good and fucked up. And if you have 1 over the 8, you're having a good time.
Okay.
So 4 over the 8 would be like, oh, fuck, we're going to commit a B&E tonight.
Okay. Got it. That makes sense.
But to your point, someone else shouldn't have to come in and demystify it for you. There should be some access there so you can enjoy it as a bop. But if it really truly is about something, ideally you'd make it so that people can figure that out. I don't know.
And I'm not sitting here saying, that Elvis Costello owes me a goddamn explanation on this shit, nothing like that. But it's, it's just like for me to really dig in and enjoy something like, when people listen to us talk about that Bruce Springsteen album, like I have all the context I could possibly ever need when it comes to Bruce Springsteen. Like there's not a whole lot he's going to put out that I'm not going to be able to immediately understand what he's talking about. I think I've listened to at least every single studio release of every song he's ever done. I think there's tons and tons of bootlegs out there that I probably haven't heard. But, I've listened to everything he's ever done. So for me, it takes no effort whatsoever to understand exactly what Bruce Springsteen is trying to say. So to come into Elvis Costello, who is somebody I have actively not listened to, for forever, it's just, and how dense lyrically he is and kind of how much he'll put things behind a wall of kind of not disinformation, just kind of confusion, like not really knowing what he's trying to say necessarily. It was certainly an experience. And I think a few of the songs I just kind of gave up. I was like, I'm never going to understand what the hell he's saying. I'm just going to listen to the music and try to pick something up about that. And this was one of those ones where I was like, I have no, like when he says, but the 1 over the 8 seems less like 1 and more like 4. And I'm like, what the fuck? Is this a math problem now? Like I was like, I don't know what the hell you're saying, man. I don't know what the hell you're saying, but musically, yeah, it was great, as are most of the songs on the album.
Yeah. So you were going to bring up Different Finger until I cut you off.
This one was just kind of funny to me. I didn't really enjoy this one so much as I thought it was just funny that he's clearly doing some adultering.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, clear. I mean, this was probably, on the whole album, I think this was probably the most direct song where it's like, there is one interpretation of what's going on here, and that is it. And I appreciate it for that, but I feel like just musically and the way he sang it, especially this one, like was very much like there was no set standard meter he was going by. It seemed like a very stream of consciousness kind of thing from him.
Yeah, definitely. And like country tends to be very direct. And the problem for me, as much as I love Almost Blue, which is the country album that came out like pretty immediately after Trust, and it's all covers. It's really good. So like he covers Good Year for the Roses, and it like vocally he does a great job on it. But on this song, it's kind of a deadpan to it. It makes it a little difficult to enjoy. Like if there's not, it's like a pretty standard honky tonk rhythm. It's got the window dressing of the piano. Like it's a very classically like saloon country kind of sound. But it's just not very exciting. I enjoy the song. And like part of me goes, turn in your Elvis Costello credentials if you're going to criticize a song, right? Like how can you say it's one of your favorite albums? You don't love everyone on it.
Yeah.
You are supposed to be realistic about these things. Is it the most exciting one? No. Is it the one I would give someone to get them into Elvis Costello? No. Like this song, again, is totally fine, but it's nothing spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the best thing about it was the kind of clever way he put everything together. Please put your rings on a different finger if you meet me tonight, because I can't stand those suspicious glances. Like, so clearly he's not the one, I guess, that's cheating. He's sleeping with someone that's doing the cheating. But I think any participation in that you're just as guilty as anybody else would be. But it's just the kind of, not saying it directly, not saying like, take your wedding rings off and like, I don't want to see your wedding rings. It's like, put those rings on a different finger. I don't want the way that people are looking at me, but it's like, it's just I thought kind of a clever way to do it. And certainly probably the most accessible lyrics that he had on the whole album.
Or it's a song about fisting. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he just said a different finger. He didn't say change hands. So I don't know. He may be into it. Who knows? Is British are weird.
Yeah, after repression, pleasure bursts.
The next one was one that I really enjoyed, was White Knuckles. This was one that I put the star next to. And I think it seems to be, the way one of the lines I think kind of explains the song very well is, he needs her like the axe needs the turkey, which is obviously talking about, decapitating a turkey to be able to prepare it for food. But it seems like, it just seems to be a very abusive relationship. And every verse kind of has a clever way of doing that. It's like they clearly seem to have a great sex life, but everything else is very destructive, and it seems like that's the thread that holds them together. But everything else is kind of falling apart. Yeah.
And it's told, I think lyrically, this is some of his best stuff from an imagery standpoint, at the very least off this album. But I would say overall, white knuckles on black and blue skin. He didn't mean to hit her, but she kept laughing. White knuckles sweating on the headboard. He never found out what the kisser was for. So it's just like in those lines paints perfectly the nature of their relationship. The fact that this is a guy who beats her, and she probably... you kind of get a sense that like maybe he's got a weird dick or he's fucking ugly. I mean, they mention him not being attractive in the song.
Yeah.
So could be the kind of thing where like she gets off on humiliating him, but it makes him fly off the handle and hurt her. And she's either, I hope this doesn't sound like a icky, weird misogynist thing to say. It's either a part of the dynamic that she accepts because she doesn't think she can do any better, or it is truly painful to her and she's unable to get away for fear. He doesn't really seem to make a concrete judgment. It's mostly the other people, like the mother and the sister, saying at the end, he's using you, I told you so. and trying to convince her to leave this negative relationship. But especially this line, he never found out what the kisser was for. It's like he won't kiss her on the mouth.
Yeah.
He'll have sex with her, he'll beat her, but the lips and the mouth are not the kisser for him. He means kisser in terms of like pow right in the kisser, the honeymooners. It's just like little tiny weird clever shit like that I dwell on when I listen to songs like this.
Yeah, and
like,
I
what
mean,
an
that was
interesting
clear.
way of putting it.
Yeah, and I mean, it was very clear that's what he was talking about, and just like I think added to the fact that this guy seems like he's very, he's got a terrible temper. Obviously, he's very like neurotic, in the way that he's not going to kiss her on the lips. Probably, maybe he thinks they're like dirty, or whatever it is. It's like maybe he's like
it's too intimate.
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Maybe he thinks that they're having sex, but if they don't kiss, they're really not that close.
Right.
Who knows what the nature of their relationship is with that, but it definitely seems weird that, it seems like she is the abused and he is just somebody that is, he's the abuser, but just seems to be like in his own head about everything, is completely insecure and takes it all out on her.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's just a very, like you said, just very interesting song. And lyrically again was like accessible enough that, it didn't take, it took one listen through for me to understand exactly what the song was about. And then, it took another listen just to kind of like make sure I was like really pulling out what I could. And it was a very good, like pretty concise kind of story. It was, I guess not story, like a snapshot, almost like a little vignette of life with these two people.
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. The broken, the damned, the confused, the outcast, the loveless, the scorned. This is classic Costello fodder. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to Shot with His Own Gun. Now this one was, we had mentioned it, just a couple times before. I enjoyed the music on this one. I felt like the lyrics, especially the chorus, was a little bit strange, where it's like clearly she shot her husband. And now they're trying to like cover it up. And it seems like maybe her dad is the one that like knows she did it and is like keeping the secret for her. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a couple ways, I guess, you could read it. And I think specifically of verse 3, to jog ahead a little bit, but they say the little corporal got in the way and he got hit by an emotional ricochet. It's a bit more now than dressing up Dolly, playing house seems so melancholy. So I get kind of like loss of innocence vibes, which make me think that maybe there's a child involved in this. He sees the mom killing the dad when the dad comes at her in a fit of rage. There's that. There's an interpretation that I looked up, and it's someone else's swipe at it. It's not canon. The idea that the little corporal was a way of referring to Napoleon Bonaparte. So this guy within the context of the song, this guy's little man complex, his Napoleon complex, got in the way and ended up getting him killed because he was an asshole to his wife. Like, hard to say. It's a little, I agree with you. It's ambiguous as to who the players are and what's going on. I guess in my mind, my headcanon is it's a husband and a wife, and the husband's a violent asshole, and the wife takes matters into her own hands, shoots the guy, and they have a kid who witnesses this whole thing. That's why it's an emotional ricochet. It wasn't like, oh, he got hit with the arterial spray. It's like he watched mommy kill daddy, and now
dad is keeping mom because he's silenced forever. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I like that. I like that explanation.
Yeah, he can't say shit because he's dead.
Yeah, the vocal cords ain't going to work. Yeah, that makes sense. But again, like musically was really good. And I think lyrically with your explanation, I think I do kind of like that a little bit more. And it definitely, it makes it so it kind of ties together, where it seemed like before it seemed kind of disjointed a bit for me, with kind of like where the story was, like who the players were, like you're saying. But when you explain that maybe they have the little corporal is their son, then you say now dad is keeping mom, but because it's like you're looking at it almost from the kid's point of view there, where the kid's not going to say dad's dead. It's going to be like, oh, dad's sleeping. He's not saying anything, like what a little kid would say if they aren't aware of like what death is necessarily at that point in their life.
Yeah. Dad's going to a farm with other dads where they have plenty of space to run and play. I also really love verse 2. Like, it's, again, little lines like this. What's on his mind now is anyone's guess, losing his touch with each caress, spending every evening looking so appealing. He comes without warning and leaves without feeling. Just like the utter hopelessness. And there's no romance in this relationship. There's no passion or intimacy in the sex. It's literally just like a duty, a compulsion. They just have their sex, roll over. It's not an act of intimacy and love. It's just compulsory, especially for her. And at what point do you say, I can't fucking take this anymore?
Yeah. And it sounds like maybe there was one of those times he came in wanting to get a little something. And she was like, not this time, pal. Not this time.
Yep.
Pop, pop.
No, putting a lock on the cookie jar.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying where he almost, he doesn't seem to paint like these kind of really misogynistic characters in his songs in a very good light. But the fact that he keeps writing about them is a little bit strange to me. I'm like, and then hearing the stories about him, about how he treats people and that sort of thing. And that specific one that you were mentioning with Stephen Stills, it's like there's a little bit of a pattern here with the Costello man.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, it's weird because I started reading his book, which is like a fucking phone book. Not in terms of how interesting it is, just the size. Like I could stop a mugging with the fucking thing. But he talks about his upbringing and his dad. You can hear how influenced Elvis Costello is with like big band and like, brass bandstand kind of stuff. And his dad was not a lounge singer, but like a bandstand singer. So every night you'd go down to this theater whose name I can't remember, coincidentally, where they shot the album artwork for Trust.
Okay.
But yeah, no, his dad would like sing all the old standards and all the blue hairs in the audience would get nice and wet. And it sounds like his dad was a decent dad and not abusive and loved the mom, but was also like kind of a philanderer. If he never actually did any philandering, he definitely had that instinct and like took it as far as he could. So it sounds like he didn't have a horrible, abusive asshole dad and a bad example of, what intimacy looks like in a marriage. It sounds like he had a pretty decent childhood. So I'm like, where does this obsession with misogynists and they get their just desserts? Yeah, but you're right. He does write about them quite a bit, especially on this album. I think a lot of that has to do with the introspection. Like, how much am I to blame for the fact that women don't stick around? Maybe it's because I have these kind of instincts.
Yeah, it could. I mean, he definitely seems to be honest with himself, honest about himself. It just seems like there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of like, he's like, yeah, I can be a piece of shit sometimes, but it doesn't sound like he's that interested in changing it either. No,
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. So moving on to Fish and Chip Paper. This was one that I'm undecided on this one. I think this was the one that I'm kind of the most on the fence about. Seems the lyrics are very, seem like easy enough to kind of understand what's going on. But I do. And I think in the chorus, the line, yesterday's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper, where it's basically saying like, yeah, this stuff happened, it was in the news yesterday. It was big news, but tomorrow we're going to be eating our food off of that. It's like, it's kind of talking about how the world is just going to keep moving on. And it's just like, and also a line, there's a man in the laundrette and he's looking through your underwear for clues. I don't know what that's supposed to entail.
I don't either. I was kind of wondering if it was like, would he find something incriminating in the laundry? Like, it's a male politician, if we want to follow that through line. Like, a male politician and there's like women's panties in his stuff? Do you just want to know if he has bad diarrhea? Like what? Like sifting through the underwear. That's not something I especially got either. So I guess my interpretation was like, I don't know, to see if, a dossier got mixed in with the dirty undies or whatever, but it's not very clear.
And I think maybe also like our American interpretation of underwear, like when I think of underwear, I think of like boxers or like just, what you literally wear underneath your pants. And I think in like Britain, I think underwear means like undershirts as well, like those little white t-shirts you would wear under like a button up, as well as
lipstick on the collar, maybe.
It could be, that could be it too. But I think it might be that we just are thinking of our version of what underwear is to us. But I think to underwear is like undergarments in general to them, so it'd be like socks, your boxers, whatever undershirt you're wearing, like it's all of that. And I think maybe if they keep that separate, they do all their laundry with that. He's not literally searching just through his like boxers or, his tighty whities or whatever, whatever kind of underpants he's wearing. I think it may be just that load of laundry he's looking for. And maybe like you're saying, a lipstick on the collar or something like that could be.
Or the guy's just a fucking pervert.
Could be too. That could very well be too. But it seems like he's almost like referencing kind of like everyday life and how it just keeps moving with this. So it'd be like weird to throw in just that one little line about like someone's looking through my underwear. Yeah. But it wouldn't put it past Elvis Costello to do that. That's for sure.
He does whatever the fuck he wants. That's what I know.
Yeah. But other than that, like I think, I think I do like the song, but I think it's one that I would have to listen to another time or two just to really figure it out. Because it was appealing at first listen, and then I was like, okay, well, now I got to try to make sense of what's going on here. So I like got that out of it, but then I was just like, how much did this song really need to get made?
Yeah,
like what's he trying to tell me here? And it maybe just he's trying to tell me nothing. It's like the Seinfeld episode of Songs. It's just a song about nothing, really.
Yeah, just I mean, I take it as like it's a tribute to Scandal and how quickly the news cycle flops over.
Yeah.
Yesterday's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper.
Yeah.
You got to capitalize on a good story before it is completely replaced by the next thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then the last song that we talked about, that we mentioned earlier, was Big Sister's Clothes. And this was the one that you were saying is about Margaret Thatcher and the British like Parliament of the early 80s, right?
Apparently.
I mean, who the fuck would have ever known that?
I mean, for real, like let me get the lyrics up here because there's just like no way. I would never ever put that together as an uneducated American. So I guess like with the benefit now of hindsight, sheep to the slaughter. Oh, I thought this must be love. All your sons and daughters in a stranglehold with a kid glove. She's got eyes like saucers, so you think she's a dish. She's the blue chip that belongs to the big fish. I'm sure someone who knows more about the conflict than me could be like, oh yeah, the big fish represents this politician or this political body. It represents the conservatives. It represents the crown.
Yeah. I think it just means probably like the elite people, like whether that's the higher ranking members of parliament or the royals even. And I think it's just saying, she's got eyes like saucers, so you think she's a dish, but so it's like she gets the people to be accepting of her and everything, but she's really the pawn or the puppet of these folks that have more power.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that for sure. I guess with not having any context for the political argument, I came up with a completely different narrative to me. And when I reframe it, just going off the text, it kind of seems like it might be about a young girl who's emulating either an older sister or at least an older popular figure and seeing what her relationship with men is like. And it kind of becomes transactional for this young girl. She's not really learning anything born out of passion. It's just like, well, the older girls are doing it. This is kind of how I'd like to be. So I guess I'd better do that to fit in and find my place. So I kind of took it as a sad song about losing your innocence, and like the chorus, it's easier to say I love you than yours sincerely. There's just like a cynicism to that about like, I'll say I love you, which should be a big fucking deal, but I'm really just saying it because it's easier than yours sincerely, and I kind of know it's going to get the warm reaction out of you that I need for this transaction to work. So I guess to me it's kind of like potentially about a young girl who's trying to act older than she is, who's trying to emulate people who have gone before her, and it's kind of leading to a coldness and a cynicism.
Yeah, that would make sense. And I think, I think also with the I love you versus yours sincerely thing, it's like if I say, yours sincerely, it's like you're almost offering, be like, hey, if you ever need a favor, or like if I can ever do anything for you, like I'm here for you, But if you say I love you, it doesn't really have that same connotation to it. So it's like, I'm going to say what I need to say to get your support, but I'm not going to offer you any of mine, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, who fucking knows? Again, if the goal was a scathing indictment of the Thatcher administration, big swing and a miss over here on the other side of the pond.
Yeah, 40 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, because it had to be about like, because it came out in January of 1981. So this had to have been about like the prior year. So 40 years ago is what we're talking about here, so it's like, yeah, I would have never, I mean, I know who Margaret Thatcher is. I know where Britain is, but it's about the extent of my knowledge of what was going on back there. But I think the bridge, he does say the sport of kings, the old queen's heart, the prince in darkness stole some tart. It's in the papers. It's in the charts. It's in the stop press before it all starts. So it's like there's definitely, I think, with putting that connotation about it being, British Parliament, that bridge probably makes some sense to some people. I have no idea what he's talking about, but I think the language he's using certainly seems like it fits in with that motif for sure.
Well, and it's like, is there a politician that at the time went by the nickname the Prince of Darkness or the Prince in Darkness? Like, and what is the sport of kings? Like, what is the widely accepted sport? So I'm sure there's like meaning to these things, but I go back to that point of like, if you have to sit down with the liner notes and a dictionary and a thesaurus, and you have to pore over all of this to get what he meant, then maybe you are only, to preserve your sanity, all you can do is take it at face value. Mm-hmm. And I know he put a lot of thought into, like, this is meticulously crafted over many drafts, but goddamn if sometimes it doesn't seem like he just says shit to say shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm man enough to admit that much.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the last song on the album, and I think overall, my opinion got a little better about Elvis Costello, but it also kind of reinforced some of the things that I didn't like about him too, which was that just very, very wordy, very verbose, and while I can't really like knock that as a style at all, because one of my favorite artists is Bruce Springsteen. As well as Coheed and Cambria. So it's like, I can't really knock somebody for lyrics that are, very dense and stuff like that. Cause I listen to plenty, but it's just, I felt like I was saying at the beginning, right before we started talking about the album, that it's just, he gives very little context about what he's talking about. And it seems like there's very, very specific language that he uses. And without knowing that context, I just was kind of lost on a lot of the songs.
I can see that. And the thing is, when we originally talked about the albums for this week, I got a wire crossed, and I thought we were going to review the new Elvis Costello. And I'm like, oh, I had this long-term plan for how I was going to like slowly bring Geoff around. And I talked to Tanner. I'm like, what do you think I should make him listen to first? And like this whole evil plan we had to bring you around. Sneaking vegetables in your pizza kind of thing. But my plans were accelerated as a result of our pact this week. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate you giving it an honest listen. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, baby.
Yeah, and I think I will go back to a few of the songs, and maybe I'll check out a couple of the other albums, because I was like, I heard enough things in here that are good that if he does more of that kind of stuff on other albums, I may very well end up liking him a lot. Maybe just this album wasn't for me. I don't know, but I'll certainly look into it for sure.
What I think I'd love to do at some point too is just make you a playlist of some of my favorites and see what you think of those.
Okay. I think that honestly, because he's released so many albums, so I think it'd be hard to, I may very I don't want to accidentally just go onto one that's like universally reviled, and totally judge him based on that. So I think, if you make a playlist or something, I'd absolutely listen to that.
All right, word. And maybe I'll get Tanner to help me work on that too.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to say give Elvis Costello a chance, man. I don't know if I'm going to say stream this album particularly, but I will say stream Elvis Costello, see if you're into him.
I'm going to say stream this one and stream the man.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you had an idea for a future thing to do on this Out on That Line podcast.
So how we're always doing 2 albums and it's a review of these 2 set albums? I had a thought. What if we capped it at 10 songs each?
Okay.
If we made playlists for each other and exchanged those.
Okay.
So instead of it's the new fucking Dierks Bentley, it's a playlist where anything goes.
Okay.
And no specific criteria. It can be an old favorite. It can be a current earworm. It could be something that you only discovered through your Discover Weekly or whatever.
Okay.
But just putting together our own little mixtapes for each other and reviewing those.
Some musical love letters.
Yeah,
Yeah. Just the boys
I'll
on the pod.
send it in my letter to you, Geoff.
Yeah, I think 10 songs. I'll probably just send you Born to Run.
Well, there we go.
Maybe I'll tack on one more. That's only got 9, I think. But that sounds like a good idea. I like that. And we could just sprinkle those episodes in here and there throughout. If it's a dry week for new albums, we could always just do that. If we do it multiple times, we can put a theme on it. Say, okay, 10 best rock songs, 10 best songs from the 70s, whatever we might decide we want to do. But I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I just figured a little change of pace, something we could try at some point.
Absolutely. And also, so this episode, Alex was mentioning that we got our wires crossed a little bit. I think I was the one that got my wires crossed because reading back on the text messages where we kind of decide what we're going to do, it was very clear that Alex meant to listen to Elvis Costello's new one. I listened to the new Tame Impala album because we were also discussing doing that one as a listener request. So what was the name of the person that requested that one?
Noor. She's a friend of mine from grad school.
Okay, excellent. So Noor, it's coming eventually. We got held up by the boss, by Bruce Springsteen, and then held up by my own stupidity on this one. But the album is coming. That album review will come eventually. And I will say, spoiler alert, I think you're gonna like what I have to say about it. But yeah, just thanks for listening. Don't think we're ignoring you. Sorry about that. And I think what's our timing at right now? Hour and 19.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a good amount of content for this episode. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we could call it here. If you
okay.
like.
Okay. So first, I want to go ahead and plug our socials because we do like to hear from you on those. So Instagram, you're going to find us at Out on That Line. On Twitter, there'll be Out on That Line 1. Our Gmail, feel free to use that. Long form emails, we'd love those. Make sure that your grammar and syntax is correct though, because I will be getting out my red pen. That's going to be outonthatline@gmail.com. Keep those album submissions coming in. We love them because it gives us, otherwise we're just going to kind of pigeonhole ourselves into just kind of what we want to listen to and what we like. And we want to hear what you like. We want to hear what, other people are into, to give us just a little broader perspective of things. I think that's it. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time.